Back again with Scott Mason talking about Tar Heel Traveler. You've got a number of things to talk about today, Scott. One of which is D-Day, something that's not only very important to the history of our nation, but personal to you because you've been there.
Yeah, I was in Normandy on the 50th anniversary of D-Day. June 1994 was the 50th anniversary, and I was doing a documentary. Before I went to Normandy, I didn't really know that much about D-Day. Well, what an education it was for me. And I interviewed veterans who landed on Omaha Beach, and the stories I heard that you don't find in history books were amazing, just things that happened to these individuals. Well, that ties into this story that airs this coming week. There's this foundry in Seagrove near Asheboro. They build sculptures and statues. Well, one of their biggest all-time projects is this D-Day memorial. One of the battles at D-Day took place at Pointe du Hoc. The soldiers back then, in 1944, had to climb this huge cliff. It was almost straight. It was vertical, about 100 feet high. And they're climbing this cliff while the Germans are on top shooting down and throwing grenades. Well, against all odds, they made it, and they overcame the Germans and then went on. Well, this foundry called Carolina Bronze, they are recreating that.
Wow.
They have sculpted 12 soldiers, 11 of whom are American and 1 German. And this all came about because the mayor of Grafton, Illinois, a small town, he is a veteran himself, and he went to visit Normandy. And as he came back to Grafton, that the trip just weighed on his mind, and he's driving into town, and he said, wait a minute, that hill there, here in Grafton, I know what we can do. We can recreate Pointe du Hoc. And so he called Carolina Bronze. So they've made these sculptures, and we caught them doing it, grinding and fashioning the statues. And then they've now delivered them on flatbed truck to Grafton for the unveiling on June 6, 2026, the 82nd anniversary. It's just interesting. It's sort of, for me personally, how it's all kind of come full circle. I mean, I was back there in 1994, and now D-Day again here in 2026.
When you think of D-Day and all those very young soldiers, I can't think of a more terrifying scenario that you could put a human being through.
You're not kidding, and you said the right word, young. I mean, just looking at these statues at Carolina Bronze, that's what leaps at you, how young these faces are. I mean, soldiers 17, 18, 19 years old. Yeah.
Wow, that's going to be powerful, I know. All right, there's a museum in Southern Pines.
Yeah,
We think about golf all the time, but there's more to Southern Pines than golf.
You know, Southern Pines is a town in Moore County, not far from Pinehurst. Of course, you do think of golf, but Southern Pines was really founded because of the railroad. The railroad came in the 1800s, and Southern Pines was a hotbed. It's interesting because back then, at the beginning, Southern Pines was nothing but a desert. All the longleaf pine trees were harvested. There was really nothing there. But it became known as a place to go to heal. And the reason it is because of the sand, the sandy soil, so it wouldn't trap moisture, and so there was really no mold. And the air was fresh, and the reputation spread. People began to go to Southern Pines, North Carolina, for healing and to breathe better. And they, of course, took the train. Well, Southern Pines is a pretty small town, but back then there were 7 big hotels in town. And so it became known as the railroad town. Interestingly enough, back then, the town was really founded by New Englanders who discovered this place in North Carolina. And so today, all the architecture is sort of northern, and a lot of the streets in Southern Pines are named for northern states. So there's Massachusetts Avenue and Connecticut Road and New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, which is really interesting. You know, I had seen those street signs in the past, but it never really registered. But that's why New Englanders founded the town. Well, the update on the story. There's the old train depot built in the late 1800s. Well, decade by decade, it deteriorated, and Southern Pines was going to tear the thing down. The government actually stepped in and said, no, we should renovate these railroad depots. So they did. They renovated the depot. Now it's beautiful. But then they were like, well, the people of Southern Towns, well, what do we do with it now? Well, there's one man, his name is Jeffrey, and he's a volunteer, and he sits there at the Welcome Center. It was his idea to turn the depot into a Welcome Center and as a museum, as a railroad museum. So there's all these historic photos. It's really fascinating, and to see people back then all dressed up as they're waiting for the train. And so it's just really an interesting story, and Jeffrey is there every day watching for the trains that still come through today, mainly freight trains, but also a couple of passenger trains come through. So it's just kind of a story where this, not only of the history of Southern Pines, which I didn't know, but also of this depot that was kind of saved from ruin and now is turned into this beautiful museum, beautiful building. And really people from around the world come to Southern Pines, of course, drawn here by golf, but they always stop into the museum.
That's fascinating. You know, kids have, I mean, I can see this being a great trip for some young kids.
Oh, it would. And, you know, that area of Southern Pines is just, it's so well maintained, and you've got this old movie theater, and the architecture is really interesting. It's a great walking area.
Yeah. Okay, so what else? Anything else on your plate that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I wanted to tell you about this bakery. Man, I should have brought you some chocolates back.
See? All right.
There is this woman who grew up in Hong Kong, and, you know, her parents baked, and so she had sort of baking in her system. Well, she began to study at culinary schools like in Paris, and she studied in Switzerland, came to the States as a young adult, worked in restaurants in New York, and worked for some of the best chefs. Well, she ends up in Durham 18 years ago and starts this bakery called Miel, M-I-E-L, Miel Bonbons. And today she has this bakery in Durham. She makes some incredible masterpieces. I mean, cakes and pies and croissants and basically, she works by herself. She does have occasional help. It's amazing, Gerald. You should see
Miel Bonbon.
What she makes. And, in fact, she was so nice. Her name is Bonnie. She was so nice to give us some treats before we left. The photographer I work with gave a box to his friend, this girl that he knows real well, who has actually is very well traveled. She ate some of those chocolates, and the photographer's friend said it was the best chocolate she's ever had. So that makes me want to go back.
Yeah, Miel Bonbon. So that's in Durham?
That's in Durham, yeah,
Wow.
kind of on West Main Street, I believe.
Okay.
And Bonnie is the sweetest thing, and I mean, you should see these things, these creations she makes. I mean, they're not only delicious, but they're beautiful. The way they're designed, they're like artistic. They're so artistic, you don't want to bite into it.
It sounds like you got a lot coming up. Leave it to the Tar Heel Traveler.
Yeah.
Something to learn and something to eat.
There's always another story, and yeah, you do learn. There's history, but there's good eating too.
Yeah, you can't go anywhere without that, man. Looking forward to it, Scott.
Thanks, Gerald.